artificial as androids, but made of flesh and blood. This becomes increasingly clear after watching the film Alien: Romulus, as it reveals many fascinating details. For instance, we learn that if a synthesized pathogen is introduced into a human body in a state of gestation, it rewrites the DNA not only of the host, but also of the embryo. The fetus begins to develop into an entirely different species. We saw something similar in Prometheus when Dr. Elizabeth Shaw became pregnant after her partner, Charlie, had a small dose of the pathogen in his system. That small amount was enough to produce a unique offspring. But why did Elizabeth give birth to a trilobite instead of a humanoid descendant? There are two key differences. Elizabeth was already pregnant when the pathogen was introduced. The existing fetus began to mutate under the influence of the introduced genome. The pathogen was not pure. It was a genome derived from its base. As a result, Elizabeth gave birth to a hybrid of a xenomorph and an engineer. If scientists had succeeded in isolating the necessary genome with the xeno component entirely removed, the result would have been an engineer. But instead, we see a creature resembling a jockey, which is referred to as a descendant. Although the director of Alien: Romulus, Fede Alvarez, initially struggled for a long time with how to portray the descendant, the first concept art resembled the space jockeys only vaguely. The team then tasked the artist with creating something unique, a being that was both an engineer and a xenomorph. Over time, Alvarez's desk was filled with dozens of sketches, but none of them either resembled the descendant of the ancient race or appeared too human. Help came from an unexpected place: Prometheus. Remember the frescoes in the hall where the urns with the pathogen were kept? There was a strange creature depicted with a trunk-like appendage on its face, spikes protruding from its elbows, long claws on its hands, and a ribcage resembling the biosuit of the engineers. This creature became the basis for the descendant. Only the head was altered, and even Ridley Scott himself approved of the hybrid's appearance. This is important, and you'll understand why later. But why go to all this trouble? Why did Fede Alvarez want to show us that this organism was a descendant of the engineers? The answer is simple. The pathogen contains a genome that, under certain conditions, facilitates the birth of a space jockey. In this way, we understand that humans are necessary for their reproduction. The genome was injected into a pregnant woman, and an engineer was born. For them, humans are an essential component of the reproduction process. Then the second question arises: why did the ancients need to create xenomorphs? Unfortunately, I don't have an exact answer, but I have some ideas. After watching Alien: Romulus, we learned that the xenomorph XX-121 is immune to the limitations of oxygen and nutrition. Of course, the most important question in the film is posed by the android, Andy.
But nothing is truly immortal. Clearly.
Absolute immortality. From this point on, I think we should use all the deleted script material. Let it be. The full script isn't available online yet, and it's unlikely to appear anytime soon. But we have almost all of Fede Alvarez's ideas that didn't fit into the final cut of the film. The full script was so long that the team had to cut more than 30% of the material. Most of what was cut wasn't essential to the plot, but not to me. Ridley Scott, on the other hand, prohibited Fede Alvarez from using the storyline from Prometheus, as he still plans to make the third movie, and finally finish the story of the android David. As for Alien, 1979, Alvarez was allowed to use everything from the original. In the new film, even Ellen Ripley makes an appearance. So, the first and most interesting thing that was cut from the script is the search mission by the Renaissance space station. At the beginning of their journey, they found the Narcissus escape shuttle, where Ripley was in stasis. The Narcissus is shown twice in Romulus. First, it's seen through the cargo bay window, and second, when the Renaissance station collides with the planet's rings. The station's defense protocol is activated, and the shuttle safely leaves the station. This is quite interesting, but unfortunately, there's no information on whether they woke Ripley up or used the shuttle's onboard computer logs to learn about the tragic fate of the Nostromo. However, we know that theoretically, they could have woken Ripley up and then erased her memory. This is possible for the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, but it remains a fact and a mystery for the near future. The most important thing is that, in the end, the corporation was able to learn everything that happened on the Nostromo. After that, they set off to search for the xenomorph, and as we know, successfully found it in space. The creature managed to create a protective cocoon around itself. This is a survival mechanism for the xenomorph. Black resin is secreted from tubes on its back. They use this substance to build hives, and in open space they can weave a protective cocoon around themselves, inside of which they completely stop all vital functions of their bodies. This is an extremely unique survival method. You remember Rook's words? In the lab, they truly thought the xenomorph was dead, but it was just in deep stasis. What does this information give us? First, we learn that the tubes on the xenomorph's back are not for breathing, and they secrete a liquid used for building not only the cocoon, but also the hive. Therefore, the descendant also secretes black slime from its back. Most likely the tubes haven't fully formed, or it hasn't yet learned to control the secretion of the resin. Second, it turns out that the xenomorph has two nostrils, which are located on its head above the upper lip, just like humans. Rumors about the xenomorph having nostrils have been circulating for a long time. We were supposed to see them in the Alien, Earth series. But in Romulus, we clearly saw the skull, which is remarkably similar to a human's. On the facial part, you can see nasal openings and cavities, which is why, as I've mentioned before in my videos, the tubes on its back are needed for building the hive, and from them, it secretes a building material. After the Renaissance station managed to locate the xenomorph in space, they began studying the organism, and based on the creature's DNA, they created parasitoids. During the story told by Rook, we see on the monitor the information about who the majority of the DNA belongs to. A large portion of the DNA found in the xenomorph is Kane's. A full 93%. This is nothing unusual. Even when it was in the chestburster stage, the organism copied Kane's DNA. And since he was a worker on the Nostromo for the Weyland Company, and all workers undergo medical exams before each mission, the Renaissance staff should have had access to Kane's medical records and his DNA. Therefore, they could easily compare the material. But why 93%? Actually, this is still a low amount. A human and a common field mouse share 85% of their genetic material. But the key point in the Romulus story is the creation of parasitoids. We know that they form inside enormous leathery cocoons. Did Rook, the android, manage to bypass the entire life cycle? Of course not. I'm personally surprised that in all the movie breakdowns, respected video bloggers claim there are no eggs in the film, but I approach my work much more meticulously. So, the android Rook managed to create a synthetic DNA of the xenomorphs. They were then placed inside special silicone casings to be transported conveniently, without worrying that a facehugger would jump out. Later, in the cardio room, they were cut open without human involvement using special equipment, and facehuggers were extracted, then placed in capsules and frozen. This is why when Andy and Tyler enter the cryo room, we see 4 devices for harvesting parasitoids, and there are remains of a silicone-wrapped xenomorph with 36 frozen facehuggers on a shelf. This was the place where parasitoids were grown, harvested, and frozen. There's fuel stored here and water on the floor because the defrosting system is broken and condensation has nowhere to go. Afterward, the capsules were transported to the development center, where the pathogen itself was extracted. Strangely, while Rook is narrating the entire story of the discovery, in the background, we see a vase we first saw in Prometheus. These containers were located on the planet LV-223. So, did Weyland-Yutani visit LV-223 before they found the xenomorph in space during the early part of their search? If so, how did they know about the urns with the pathogen? And this is where it gets interesting. Fede Alvarez originally planned to expand the entire story of Mission Romulus. Rook was supposed to explain what happened after Peter Weyland's disappearance. 3 search expeditions were sent, but they weren't looking for their leader, they were searching for the surviving urns. Eventually, they managed to locate a military laboratory of the engineers. It turned out that from all the urns, the pathogen had leaked and the material had decayed. But later, they were incredibly lucky when the Nostromo spaceship not only stumbled upon the alien ship, but also managed to preserve a living sample of the superorganism. This is what they found in space unofficially, though it was rumored that Ridley Scott asked Fede Alvarez to remove the dialogue from the film and any significant mentions of the Prometheus mission. Now we know why. Ridley plans to finish the story of David, and maybe LV-223 will appear in a future project. Of course, this addition could have closed a huge plot hole. Why search for the xenomorph in open space when you could just go after the pathogen on LV-223? Plus, we would have learned that the pathogen and microorganisms within it die in open space. To store the black liquid, you need the perfect vessel, and in our case, the perfect organism, an immortal creature in which all genomes can be preserved forever. For this, the engineers created the xenomorph. It can survive in open space and, during reproduction, copies the DNA of other beings, even preserving it after death. All this is to collect more genomes from other beings and spread them across the cosmos. The pathogen is a living fragment of God, and in this fluid, genomes and microorganisms are stored, capable of accelerating evolution and even recreating life. This creature has its own mission: to preserve the legacy of the ancient race. Indeed, alien. Romulus revealed many secrets, but one storyline was completely cut from the film. Alvarez really wanted to explain the scene of world creation in Prometheus in his own way. According to him, this ritual remained unfinished, and many viewers didn't fully understand what actually happened, and partially, I agree with him. According to his idea, when the engineer sacrificed himself, he drank special microorganisms created from the pathogen, and as a result of the breakdown and creation of new DNA, Luca was born. For those who don't know what Luca is, let me briefly explain. It is the ancient population of organisms from which all current life forms on Earth descended. When scientists started studying the genomes of plants and animals, they discovered that we are all distant relatives of each other. That is, all living organisms, including bacteria, fungi, and plants, have one common genomic ancestor, and its name is Luca. If we know that Luca was initially created from an engineer, then, in the end, evolution always follows one path, which is why the planet Paradise looks so much like Earth. The plants, the family of grasses, everything is created according to one principle.
To find a human vegetation this far from Earth.
Diuji secara klinikal, dipercayai seisi